Namaste, everyone. Armita, a Planet Yoga Facebook fan, asks me to break down again the skill of push and reach. If you recall, I broke it down earlier in classical Adho Mukha Svanasana or downward facing dog. But Armita brought up a great point. How can we teach this skill to someone that has perhaps very, very tight hamstrings and can't even think about getting their heels down on the floor in down dog pose? Well, first of all, we don't need to instruct our students to get the heels right away down to the floor. That's first. Second, Armita, if you make the pose much easier for them, then they'll understand the components and perhaps have a little bit more skill of putting them together when it's actually time to do the classical pose. So what I brought over to my mat is a chair and a block. And I'm going to do what I call half dog. Now, half dog isn't really a tabletop position. I'm going to walk my feet a little bit further from my pelvis and hips so that as if I were doing the real downward facing dog pose. Because the closer I bring my feet in, the closer I bring them to my hips, the less pull it's going to be on the hamstrings, right? But I want them to get a sense of some stretch in the hamstrings because that way they realize that there's some work to be done there. So I'm going to do it without the block first. I'll show you in just a moment with the block. But first I'm just going to take my hands to the front corners of the chair. And Armita, how I hold my hands, if you may already know this, but how I hold them is I hold onto the front corners with my thumbs pointed forward and my fingers underneath. And the reason I do that, especially for beginners, is that it starts to teach them the external rotation of the shoulder, of the arm, so that they get out of the habit right away, understanding that this is incorrect and injurious, and this is actually is correct and very healthy for the joint. So this helps them a little bit by putting them in this position. So here we go, taking my thumbs to the top, just wrapping my fingers around. Perhaps I've already invited my students or instructed my students how to make that rotation. And then they can start to walk their feet back. So I have them walk back, as I said earlier, a little past the hips, and then the knees stay bent. So from this position, we take out, right, or eliminate the issue of the hamstrings. So the knees are bent quite a bit, and then I get them to push through the hands and feel how the spine starts reaching back, and that informs the hips to pull back as well. Ears line up with the upper arms, no sagging in the shoulders, right, just a push and a reach back. So here's what it would look like if they weren't doing it, just a push. Right? Shoulders have to go away from the ears. Knees have to bend enough to accommodate tight hamstrings to send the push sequentially reaching through the rest of the spine. And then I invite them perhaps to straighten the legs a little bit more. And notice what happens in their lower back when they go to straighten. Because if they've lost the push, their lower back will round in this way. Rather, lost the reach, I'm sorry. The push happens here. So when the hamstrings are tight, and there's no way they're going to get their feet up off the floor, my mat is slipping, it's best to put a little, the chair up against the wall. But when their hamstrings are so tight, and you ask them to straighten their legs, even in this half dog position, the lower back will start to round to try to accommodate what can't happen back here. So again, push happens through the hands, knees can be bent, and then straighten the legs some more. Okay. Then, if you get good results with that, you might consider using a yoga block. The yoga block can help them to access the legs a little bit more. You know, the women sometimes have a hard time accessing the inner legs, the adductor muscle. So we bring that block to the inner upper thighs, about like 2 inches away from the pelvis. And then we try the same thing. Let me bring my mat a little closer because I don't have it up against the wall, but you should practice this with your chair up against the wall, or sometimes even just a 10-pound sandbag on the rung on the back is enough. So you bring your hands just as before, and now you walk back. And now instead of bringing your feet beyond the hips, you bring them underneath the hips. And you push with the hands, and maybe they still bend the knees a little, but they squeeze the block with the inner thighs. I'm not sure if you can see it, but I'm squeezing the block just a little, not a lot, just a little, and using that as a reference to inform the hips to move back a little bit. So again, here I go, push. Now I'm going to squeeze the block just a little and use that as leverage, really, to pull the hips back. So there's something to try. Have fun, let me know how it goes, and thanks for your post.